I'm Zoe Brunswick, Group HR Director at RSK, and I'd like to welcome you all to this discussion about LGBTQ+. Joining me today is Davey Coulter, Regional Business Development Director for Europe, and he's going to be talking to us about his experiences as a member of the LGBTQ+ community. So Davey, welcome to today's call. If you could start by just telling everyone a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Zoe. It's my pleasure to take part in this. I was born in 1973, 6 years after the passing of the 1967 Act, the act that decriminalised homosexuality, but only in England and Scotland. I was raised and grew up in Northern Ireland at that time. It was almost as difficult to be a heterosexual as it was a homosexual. The Northern Ireland conflict was raging, and these were dark and very difficult time. Attitudes to sexuality in Northern Ireland were deeply conservative. Belfast was hardly known for progressive attitudes towards sexuality. It was also fueled by one of our leading political parties and hammered home by pretty much all of our religious organizations. So homophobia in my early life was rife. I was bullied at school, as a lot of my friends were. And as I began to become aware of my own feelings, I assumed that I was pretty much the only one that had them. I hadn't any gay friends. Trying to find a role model was impossible, nearly as impossible as finding advice or guidance or just simply someone to talk to. So the only option I had in those very early days was to masquerade behind a lie. And that's so common with people of my generation, and it's probably still happening today. So what was my lifeline? My lifeline was sport. Sport gave me a way out. It was really my saving grace. It allowed me to focus and dedicate my life and my time to achieving goals. I played rugby, tennis. I competed in the school's athletic championships. I also played golf and lawn bowls. Lawn bowls, I hear you cry. Well, if it was good enough for St. Francis Drake, it was good enough for me.
Wow, that's quite a history there. And obviously with the sport aspect of it, you played a lot of sport there. So were you successful in what you did?
I had a modicum of success, yes. I captained the rugby team. I played tennis for the county. I won 4 years in a row. Within the athletics team, I held a record for the javelin, shot put, discus, and high jump 4 years in a row, winning those championships end to end. In bowls, I won 6 Ulster titles. I won 3 All-Ireland titles. I reached 2 British finals, and I also had the honour of playing for my country a few times, both indoor and out. And I think I don't want that to come across as showing off, Zoe. I think I just want to highlight that no matter what your background is, if you dedicate yourself and you have, self-belief, you can succeed, no matter what your obstacles are.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. So moving into the employment arena, have you always been open with your colleagues about your sexuality?
That's probably a difficult question. I suppose in the early days of my working career before joining RSK, the answer was simply no. I probably didn't feel it necessary to discuss my personal life or bring my personal life into work. But I suppose looking back to a certain extent, that was also a masquerade, and I probably didn't feel comfortable bringing my true self to work. I think nowadays it's becoming clear that when, you know, employees and colleagues can bring their authentic selves to work, they're a lot more productive. They're certainly more happy. They're a lot more engaging. And research has recently shown that coming out increases job satisfaction, the intention to stay with the firm, so staff retention is a lot better. And it gains, and when coming out, we gain the emotional support from our co-workers. Whereas staying in the closet, which a lot of people, I mean, the research shows a lot of people are still afraid to be who they actually are. Staying in the closet has costs, both for the individual and for the company.
Yeah, I mean, what reactions would you say you've had over the years when you have, you know, spoken to other colleagues about your sexuality?
Well, I mean, with regards to RSK, I joined RSK in 2006. I have to say that these last 15 years have been some of the happiest of my life. I have been made to feel like one of the family. I have loved every day working for this fantastic company. Through the good times and bad, we have come through recessions, we have come through, you know, COVID, hopefully coming through COVID, and a lot of other challenges. But I think what sets RSK apart is driven by our chairman Alan and his family ethos. Always, whenever I joined the company, we had less than 1,000 employees, and now I couldn't tell you how many we have. You could probably do that. So I think it's nearly 7,000.
6,000 and growing.
And I mean, you know, he has still driven that family feeling, that family ethos, and that's really important.
Good. And have you had any negative reactions at all that you've experienced, you know, in sort of any time during your sort of employment, you know, your working career where you have been open with colleagues?
I have to say no. I've got to say no. And maybe I'm just one of the lucky ones. Perhaps I take people as I find them, and I'm quite a positive, motivating individual. You know, I like to think that I'm quite fun to be around. And I have to say no. I've never had a negative experience in discussing my private life with colleagues. Certainly not in RSK.
Well, that's really positive to hear. Does it surprise you then that in a Stonewall survey that was completed in 2018, that nearly a third of LGBT staff said that they basically wouldn't share that with colleagues for fear of discrimination? Does that surprise you?
I think the short answer is no. It certainly doesn't surprise me. I do believe that the journey of inclusion and diversity is changing for the better. I think we've made really great steps, but I think we still have quite a journey to travel.
Okay. And how would you say that we can support our colleagues basically in terms of how they can bring their whole selves to work?
I feel communication is key. I would create networks, setting up steering groups. I think that sends a clear message to staff that you are important, and you, more importantly, you have a voice and it's being heard. I think the network must be inclusive for all. I would provide training to all staff, as I know you do, Zoe, through the training programs, and we're rolling out that as we speak. I think that training has to be on all levels of equality, not just LGBT, but levels of inequality and discrimination across the board. I would also support charity events, especially around LGBT youth, who are our future. Another thing that's probably worth mentioning is when it comes to what I call model inclusive language. I think that's the technical term for it. And I think Zoe, as head of HR and an HR professional, you and your team can be powerful agents for change by walking the walk, but more importantly, actually talking the talk. In all professional communications, and RSK being a very professional organization, using model inclusive language is very, very important these days. And I think, to give you a short, simple answer, what I mean by that is to learn and use the preferred pronouns for employees in RSK. So rather use spouse or partner rather than the gendered husband or wife to refer to someone's spouse, especially if you don't know the gender of the person that you're referring to. Partner also works for non-married couples. So the likes of myself, whenever I've been asked over the years at different meetings or dinner parties or business lunches, how's your wife, David? Are you married? All these questions are really difficult. And I think it's about changing the mindset and understanding that perhaps what we did a little while ago isn't acceptable today. And I think small steps lead to great change. And this is possibly one of the things that we could look at.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say I agree with that. I think it's really important to get the language right and to encourage people to ask and be inquisitive and not have fear of saying something incorrectly, to try and be open with colleagues and learn from them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think also getting buy-in from the top, from our leadership team. I think educating our business leaders about the importance of inclusivity. I have to say that anybody that I've ever dealt with from the leadership team, are already there. They're highly intelligent, mindful, well-traveled people. I think we need to create a safe space for those business leaders to ask those embarrassing questions offline, because it's probably something that they haven't had to deal with, or maybe they don't know anybody that's gay, and then having to perhaps have an awkward conversation. So I think, providing leadership with platforms that the likes of me, I've always been open and honest, and my boss, Nigel Board, we have great, as we say in Ireland, crack and banter around this, and he can ask me anything and I will reply. I think once we get the leadership team on board, and they start leading inclusivity initiatives across the company. Once our leadership teams are comfortable and on board, they'll be fantastic resources for an authentic, inclusive tone for all of our employees.
Thank you. Now, that's a really useful answer, and I do think that you're right. It is about feeling comfortable in asking those awkward questions and, not being afraid to ask, not holding back for fear of sort of upsetting someone. So it's having that space, isn't it, as you said, to ask those awkward questions. And it is all a learning curve across all areas of equality and diversity. And as long as it comes from a good place, hopefully people recognise that. How would you say that perceptions have changed over the years towards the LGBTQ plus community, and how do you think employers have been sort of integral in maybe supporting those changes?
I think if you look up the word progress, it reads forward or onward movement towards a destination. And I do believe that we have made progress, and it is a journey. The things about progress is that when it occurs, what went before becomes unimaginable. My partner is 30 years of age. He and people his age have seen the period of ascent being leveled, marriage equality being established, and Section 28 being overturned. So to this generation, the possibility that any gay individuals in the UK would be denied the right to wed the person that they love is so out of date. It's just totally unthinkable to these people. Not to mention the possibility that being born a certain way and living a life that is true and honest as an LGBT person, that alone would have been enough to send you to prison. I mean, that just seems so totally absurd to this generation, that it's just totally unthinkable. So I think to get to this point in our journey of equality has been a really long, hard, dark, tough road, but one certainly that has been worth traveling. I definitely think that, as I said earlier, there's still a long way to go, but I think people are starting to understand. I think people are starting to not take the LGBT and minority groups for granted anymore. And I think progress has been made.
And I suppose with the rise of social media as well and technology, obviously a lot of these things are a lot more visible now and people can be a lot more vocal about it, and talk about it and share information. So, surely combined with that and sort of generational changes, all of that is hopefully leading this in the right direction.
I totally agree. I mean, I have to tell you a funny story. Quite a while ago, my mum, who's 83 years of age now, so she has a way of putting things, and she phoned me up one night, and she says, "David, you're always complaining about gay rights and stuff." And she says, "Yous are everywhere." And I says, "What do you mean?" She says, "I switched on the television to BBC Two and I'm watching Emmerdale and there's two yous on the TV now." I said, "Yous are in EastEnders, yous are in Emmerdale, yous are everywhere." But that's just my mum and that's that generation. And I didn't find that offensive at all. I find it actually really, really funny. And I think the media have played their part. I definitely think the media have played their part, and a positive part.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree with that. So obviously quite a big part of the LGBTQ plus community is centred around Pride, which runs across the month of June. So can you tell us a bit about Pride and maybe some of the meaning behind the rainbow flag?
Yeah, Pride was probably established in the late 1960s. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people rioted following a raid on a very famous pub called the Stonewall Inn. It was a gay bar on Christopher Street, and you've probably heard the name Christopher Street. There's been songs written about it and stories told about it. And that street is in Greenwich Village in Manhattan and New York City. The riot and the further protests and rioting over the following nights were the watershed movement in the modern day LGBT rights movement, and that was the start of people organizing themselves better. And what started off as very, very small groups of people, I mean, today I mean, the scale is totally unthinkable. It's got to, maybe 200,000 or 300,000 people walking through the streets of London, for Pride. The rainbow flag, it also dates back to 1978, in which an American artist called Gilbert Baker, an openly gay man and also a drag queen, to try and get himself a little bit extra money, designed the first rainbow flag. Baker was he was a friend of one of the leading lights in that movement, a gentleman called Harvey Milk. Harvey was one of the first openly gay elected officials in the United States. And Harvey wanted him to create a symbol for pride for the gay community. So Baker thought about it for a while, and he decided to make the symbol a flag because he saw flags as the most powerful symbol in the States at that time. As he later said in an interview, our job as gay people was to come out, to be visible, to live in the truth, as I say, to get out of the lie. He thought that a flag really fits with his mission statement, and because the way of proclaiming your visibility, of saying this is who I am, it just fitted with him. So he got down to looking at the rainbow and the colours from within the rainbow, and he got down to actually producing what was then, it's slightly changed now, the rainbow flag. In those days, the colours had meanings. There was a hot pink in those days, which has since been dropped from the rainbow flag. Pink was for sex, red was for life, orange was for healing, as it still is today. Yellow was for the sunlight, green was for nature, turquoise for art, indigo for harmony, and violet was for spirit.
Wow. It's yeah, who knew? I think obviously for a lot of people out there, they see the pride symbol, the rainbow colours being used each year, and it's interesting just to hear the background of how that came about, because obviously it's very important in the pride during the month of June, isn't it, for the pride celebrations. So how will you be celebrating pride this year?
Yeah, we normally start off in my house, quite a few friends, and we go down to Belfast Pride, depending on obviously the COVID situation this year. But I can remember a time when Pride in Belfast was maybe 200-300 people tops walking behind a bus in the middle of Belfast, where there were hundreds of people hurling abuse and nearly from every avenue and corner and street. And then if we fast forward to 2019, the last Pride we were able to have, there was over 100,000 people that attended the Belfast Pride. And it was a fun, packed family event for all. There was big business, there was finance, there was the large retailers all had floats. There was the construction companies, there was the legal firms. They all have their own banners. There was the PSNI, and for the first time, I think in 2019, we were joined by the Garda Síochána, which is the Irish police in the southern part of Ireland. So it's a really change for the better.
Yeah, no, I think, that really shows, doesn't it, how you talked about earlier, the change in perceptions, and obviously going from such a small number to having this big fun-filled family event shows that people are really getting behind that now, and wanting to celebrate with that and make it a really positive experience for all, and look to remove that stigma. So that's really interesting to hear. And hopefully, I know obviously there's lots of COVID restrictions still in place, but I think there's quite a few events that are running online as well, where people can't get together in their sort of local cities and communities. So hopefully people are able to join in with those.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's been such a strange time for everyone. I think we just have to, see what happens and support it and celebrate it as best we can.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So What's the one piece of advice you'd give to someone who is maybe struggling to come to terms with their own situation and maybe their sexuality?
I think don't be afraid. Certainly not in the days that we're living in now. I think certainly don't be afraid. I think ask for help. Um, I said asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's evidence of self-awareness and having the courage and strength to actually say, I'm sort of struggling here, can you help me? And there's lots of organizations. I know I've sent you, maybe 10 or 15 organizations, of which I know we're going to post on our website and from this podcast. There's lots of really good organizations, from Stonewall to the Rainbow Project to counselors to Pink News to whatever, and no matter what background, ethnic background you come from, there's a support network out there and probably very close. And it's even reaching out to colleagues. Not that I'm a counsellor, but I mean, my telephone number is there for anyone that's struggling with their sexuality. I'm more than happy to have a chat. But I think the short answer is don't be afraid. I think reach out.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And obviously, as a business, we've got an internal community of mental health first aiders. So again, it's encouraging employees to reach out to them for all aspects of anything that's impacting their mental health. And obviously this can have a significant impact. So it's about, don't sort of try and struggle on your own, reach out. And the whole point of today is really to send out that message that you are not alone. So I suppose, just to end the podcast, why do you think it's important for individuals to share their own personal experiences?
We had this conversation, and I said to you, it's something that I haven't felt necessary to this stage to discuss, but I think it is important. I think sharing, life experiences prevents us from repeating the mistakes of the past. I remember a quote by C.S. Lewis. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And I think that's sort of sums it up for me. I think it's good to talk. I think it's good to learn from people that have came before. I certainly have, and also the mistakes that have been made in the past. One of my favorite artists. You can see some art behind me. I collect a little bit of art. But one of my favorite artists at the moment is a French guy living in Los Angeles called Mr. Brainwash. And one of his key statements is follow your dreams, and love is the answer. And I think with that, we'll end.
Yeah, no, that's perfect end to that. So I just want to thank you very much for your time today. It's been really insightful, and hopefully those colleagues that will be listening to this will, realise that they aren't alone and there are plenty of support services out there. So thank you again for your time, David.
Thanks very much indeed, Zoe. It was a pleasure.